Hey you guys, it's Eds here and it's time for another story time. This time this story is about me going to jail. Okay, so my first time going to jail, so all started with the adventure of me trying to go get some coochies. So it was Valentine's Day, Valentine's morning, because it was really early in the morning or late at night, depending on how you see it. And me and a really close friend of mine, we'll call him Zeroni. And me and Zeroni, it was his car. He let me use his car to drive back home from college to see my girlfriend G. G was still in high school at the time. I had already graduated and moved on to college, and I would come back to see her quite frequently. And so this time I had snuck back to see her on Valentine's Day. So I pull up to her house and, I let her know, I text her, call her and let her know that, hey, I'm outside. And the goal was for her to come outside, us to meet and, us to figure things out from there, because I wasn't going to sneak in her house, especially with her dad being there. So I'm sitting there waiting, and then as I'm sitting there waiting, I get a text and she's like, hey, my dad caught me trying to sneak out. She's like, he's calling the cops, you better leave. I left, and because I knew her dad didn't like me, because he used to like me when we first were hanging out, but when he found out that me and her were gay together, he stopped liking me and he didn't want us to hang out anymore. So that's when our problems originally started, was before I even went off to college, and somehow he found out about us being together. So that's where that all started. So I knew he was pretty serious, and when it came to calling the cops and whatnot, so I just went ahead and left. And while I'm leaving, a cop car is going the opposite way of where I'm going. I'm completely out of the area, almost out toward closer to where I live. So yeah, the cop was going the opposite way. He turns his lights on and pulls us over. I immediately start trying to wake Zeroni up. And Zeroni he never said it, but I'm pretty sure he had some type of condition where it was similar to narcolepsy, because when he would go to sleep, he would just fall asleep sometimes, and he would be so out there was no waking him up, and he would just do this randomly sometimes. So this was me attempting to wake him up, and I just could not get him to wake up. So we did have marijuana in the car, so it was in the middle console, and I'm trying to wake him up so I could figure out what to do, because I've never been in this situation before. I've never been arrested, pulled over by cops in a situation like this at all. So when he wouldn't wake up, I just did the next thing that I could do, which was to hide the marijuana. And so I stashed it in the best place I could, which was a place specifically to women. And I stashed it on up there, and I waited till the cop came to the car. And he asked us, like, do you know why I pulled you over? And I asked all those questions and like that. And I was like, no, I don't know why you pulled you over. He was like, because, we got a phone call about there's somebody trespassing and your car matches description. And he starts to go into detail about the whole thing, like you were at so-and-so's house and whatnot. And then he flashes the light over to my friend Zeroni, and that's when Zeroni starts to wake up. And of course Zeroni's knocked out. We had already smoked a while before, and he wakes up, his eyes are bloodshot red, and he's like confused and disoriented. Zeroni's from California, so he has this real slow, I don't know if that's why, but he has this real slow talk about it. So he's like, what's going on, when he wakes up. So the cop's like, okay, he starts asking us questions like, what's going on, where we headed, and I tell him I'm headed back to school, whatever, and then that's when he starts the whole, I think I smell marijuana in the car. And so I'm like, oh, I don't know why type, I deny it. And then Zeroni's still over there looking confused. So he tells us to get out the car. So we get out the car. We're both standing at the back of the car, just kind of like, I'm not confused, because I know that there was marijuana in the car. So there's every reason for him to assume that it smells like that. But at the same time, I'm thinking, I don't know what I'm thinking. I really don't know what was going through my head. I just know I was panicking. So anyways, the cop goes to the back of his car. He opens up the back seat. And this is when I start panicking, because I see 4 paws jump out of the back seat of this cop car. And this is something I always tell people, because at the time, but in high school, I took this vet tech class where we studied to be a veterinary technician. And I remember something that the teacher would tell us about how well dogs can smell. And she would say how we can smell the cookies cooking, but the dogs can smell the butter in the cookies cooking. So immediately when I see the dog, I start panicking. I start crying. And the cop looks over to me and he's like, "Why are you crying?" And I'm just like, I start lying because I can't tell him why I'm actually crying, because I know we're about to get to jail because we have marijuana on us. But anyway, so I lie and I'm like, "Oh, because I've never dealt with the cops before. I've never been in this situation. I don't know what to do. I'm panicking pretty much." And he's like, "Well, if you don't have anything to hide, then you shouldn't have to worry." Bullcrap line that they give you. So the dog goes over to the car and he jumps into the window almost immediately and starts sniffing and barking or whatever. And then my homeboy Zeroni was like, "Hey, why is your dog in my car?" And the cop's like, "I didn't tell him to get in the car. He got in the car because he smelled something." And so I'm like, "Oh God, we're about to go to jail." So I'm really panicking mentally. And the cop finally gets the dog out and goes and starts searching himself. And so that's when he starts going on the carpet. And he comes out and is like, "You see these?" And he picks up seeds and stems and stuff that we threw out from just rolling blunts and stuff. And so I'm like, "I don't know what those are." And he was like, "Oh, okay." So he sets that on the back of the car and he keeps pulling out stems and seeds and like little stuff, like little paraphernalia stuff nothing like big. And so he was like, "Oh yeah, you've got all this different stuff." He pulled out rolling papers, and Zeroni was like, "Hey, I those are just because I roll my own cigarettes," in which he did have loose tobacco in the car, so he could actually be proven that that's what he does. But anyways, so they were pretty much just being an ass towards us, because my homeboy Zeroni asked if he could go pee and they wouldn't let him, and they told him he just had to hold it or he'd have to pee on himself, which eventually he did end up peeing on himself. So anyway, so we're standing on the side of the road, we're getting searched, and then more cop cars pull up, and finally I'm pulled off to the side by a female cop, and she pats me down more thoroughly than a male cop could, I guess. And then that's when later she comes back and she brings the dog, and she was like, "So this dog," she told me, looked at me, she's like, "So this dog's going to search you. If there's anything that you want to disclose before that, then you can." And all I can remember is I looked at the dog, I looked at its teeth, and I thought about my vagina. And I just went that order. Just look at the dog, look at the teeth, my vagina. And I just was like, I didn't want to lose it that night. I barely even started using her, and I just didn't want that dog to gobble it up. So I was like, "Yeah, I got something." And she was like, "Okay, we'll go get it." So I did like a little cough and drop. I did a little squat and I pulled it on out and I gave it to her. Kind of like dangled it in front, like because I knew it had all my little juices and stuff on it. But she had a glove. Otherwise, we would have been real close and intimate in that moment. But she took it and, bagged it or whatever. So then that's when I guess they decided to go ahead and handcuff us and put us in the back of the car. So now we're at the actual jail. So I guess because I had already gave up the marijuana, I didn't need to be strip searched. But because Zeroni hadn't had any of that, they went ahead and strip searched him when we got there. And I just remember they went behind this curtain. It was like just being in a regular, like if you were to go to a swimming pool, just like a regular little stall with a curtain, and you could hear everything that was going on and what they were telling him to do and instructing. And I just remember they was like, "Okay, we need you to just pull your pants down." And then after there was that slight pause, and they were all both like, because there was two cops in there with him, Zeroni at the time, they was like, "Oh, you're a little guy, huh?" And then I was kind of sitting there, kind of trying not to laugh, because I was like, that was kind of rude for them to say that so loud and to, to tease him like that. And then I heard them say, "Okay, now squat." And then I heard him say cough. And then I heard Zeroni back there coughing. And then in my head, I couldn't get the image out of just imagining him being butt ass naked and squatting and coughing. And I just couldn't imagine how of an experience that might have been for him. I would have loved to get Zeroni's side of it. So then after his little strip search, we got books fingerprinted and everything. And then we got put into separate tanks. He went to the male one, I went to the female one. So that started my venture into being at the actual jail. So of course I'm freaking out. By then I've cried quite a few times. Tried to hold it together, just didn't know what to do. And then finally I see this phone being slid back and forth between like the male and female side. And I'm like, okay, I forgot. Like, we get that one phone call. So I, before we get shipped away for, this is what I'm thinking. We get shipped away to prison for the rest of our life. We get that one call to say goodbye to everybody. So I'm like thinking of who I can call, and I was like, I can't call my grandmother. I was like, she would be too disappointed when he'd be lectured. I was like, I couldn't think to call my siblings. I was like, I just couldn't think of anybody where they would understand the predicament I was in. And so I ended up actually calling my mother, because I knew she'd be the most understanding, and she was. She basically talked me down, was like, you can't cry, you got to toughen up, baby girl. You can't let them see you cry. It'll be okay. She kind of tried to break down the whole process of it. You'll probably go to court tomorrow morning. It'll be okay. And so, they helped calm my nerves. So that's what I did. I toughened up, and I, just thought the most positive. And plus, while I was in there, I talked to some of the girls that I was locked up with because they asked me, what are you in here for? And I told them. They were like, oh, well, we're in here all because of different similar things, DUIs, little stuff, tickets or whatever. She's like, we'll all probably get up in the morning and go to court, and then we'll all get released. And I was like, oh, okay. So that helped calm my fears too. So I just was like, I stopped crying, and I just was basically trying to figure out how I was going to make it through the night, because it was freezing cold in there. I didn't want to sit on the thing. Plus there was this one woman who just would not sit down and stay still. She just continually got up and went to go pee. And of course we're in jail, so the toilet's right there in front of everybody. And that didn't bother me, because we didn't have a choice. That was what we had to do. But it was the fact that she would get up, go pee, and it would be like a couple droplets. It'd be like a tinkle tinkle. And then she'd wipe, get up, and go sit back down. 2 minutes later, get up, go back, tinkle tinkle, get up. And she did that dang near for 2, 3 hours, 4 or 5 hours straight, it seemed like, before everybody finally went to sleep. Because I don't remember when everybody went to sleep, because I was standing in the corner, like going over my life choices, thinking I'm never going to be the same after this. I'm thinking I should have wore 2 pairs of drawers, and I'm thinking I'm going to prison for the rest of my life. I'm just thinking the absolute worst, and I'm just stressing, and I'm like leaning with my shoulder up against the wall, and somehow I end up falling asleep that way. And the only way I ended up waking up is because my knee gave out on me, and I almost ended up face planting because the knee gave out under me, and I fell. I almost fell, but I caught myself, thank God. And that's when I looked up, and everybody around me was asleep, bundled up and stuff. So I just went into the corner and bundled up and went to sleep myself. And that's what I did. I went to sleep, and then I woke up to some noises. And the guards were outside calling people's names. There was a tray sitting in front of me. Basically, they had already gave us breakfast, so I could, hurry up and started eating, because he started calling names, and he was calling people out. And so he started calling all the different females out. And I was like, oh, maybe we're about to go to court. So I'm like shoveling these nasty bologna sandwich in my mouth. It was these stale Cheeto Puffs, and then I didn't know what to get to drink, because I had this drink mix thing, and I didn't know where to get the water from, but not completely oblivious to the fact that it was connected to that toilet over there. And I was just like, that wasn't going to happen regardless. I was just going to be real thirsty by the end of my time in jail. So he calls all these girls out, and I'm thinking, okay, we're going to court. Turns out that none of the girls who were in there with me were going to court with us. They were all actually going to general population, because they all got jumpsuits and were shipped on to Gen Pop, I guess is what they called it. So then I was in there alone and confused, not knowing what was going to happen to me. And so then eventually later on, they called my name. They put me in like slavery time shackles, is how I remembered it, because they put my wrist in handcuffs, and then they put my ankles in handcuffs, and then they shackled those all together. So I was like, I couldn't really move. And then they expect you to get into this van with this like a 2 feet off the ground, and I'm just supposed to somehow magically jump up there when I ain't got no feet, no access to my arms and stuff. It was dumb. So it's like you had to sit down and swing yourself up, or you had to do that little hop. And I was just like, what kind of nonsense? And so then we get to the courthouse, and we're walking in like we're real live criminals. Like I felt like I had murdered somebody, because I'm walking in with these shackles on, chained to everybody, like I murdered somebody, like I'm this serious criminal. And I'm sitting here like all I'm here for is like a half a gram of marijuana. It made no sense at all to me. But anyway, so we go through the whole court process. And luckily, I was released on my own recognizance, is what they called it, and I could come back to court at a later date. To make matters worse of the fact that I just spent my night in jail, I get my phone and I have a voicemail from my girlfriend, or well, I guess ex at the time now. It's saying how she can't do it anymore. She can't keep getting in trouble. It's too much on her, and that she thinks that we should go ahead and end it. In my head, I'm like, which is fine, because yeah, we're going through a lot to try to be together. I just spent the night in jail, and you're talking about you can't do it anymore, and you don't want to get in trouble. I almost got taken by a broomstick by some random chick. I might be exaggerating a little bit, but that's the things that went through my head, and it could have happened if I would have really went to jail. Okay, so later when I went to court, couple of things happened that made it memorable. Was one is that they refused to allow my grandmother's friend, who was a lawyer, to represent me, which was probably part of the reason why I got dismissed. And then the second one was that my girlfriend at the time, G's dad, came up there and talked against me. And my grandmother was extremely upset that and my grandmother's a really docile person. Like, she's really, like, she doesn't get hyped, doesn't yell, doesn't cuss, doesn't do anything. But she was really upset with the fact that this guy came up there and talked against me and basically got me a case which could potentially ruin my future, is basically what she was getting at. Later on, though, I appealed the case. The dad didn't show up to that one. The cop actually showed up to that one, who pulled me over, and basically he got chewed out, and he had no probable cause to pull me over, and everything got dismissed. So that was a blessing. But you guys gotta learn. You gotta make smart decisions when you're younger. Gotta really think before you make decisions, because it's something that could ruin your life forever. But thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate it, and I hope you like, comment, and share, and subscribe. And I will see you guys later.